Hey, Karl, you're live on the Ecoflys podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for the invitation, Spence.
Oh yeah, I'm really happy to have you on. I think you're an expert in the industry. I know you got rained on a little bit earlier, but I'm glad to hear you're doing good today.
It's
Um,
always a challenge when you're carrying entire trailers full of gear and it starts to downpour. So you get used to covering it ahead of time. Just always having tarps with you and planning ahead. Do your fly friends call you Spence or Spencer? Which do you
uh,
prefer?
they call me Spencer, but at some reptile shows they call me the Fly Guy.
Got
So
it. So either one of those.
one of the vendors' kids is trying to get people to call me Bugs, but I'm trying to make sure that doesn't
Dude,
happen.
that's pretty cool, especially if it's spelled with a Z.
Maybe I'll have to make that like my Instagram handle or something like that.
Yeah, you can't just be boring bugs with an S. It has to
Yeah.
be a little bit, a little bit higher flair.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to have first I wanted to talk about a little bit how we met because I think it's important. So we met on a Facebook group, Black Soldier Fly Larva Farming, and I think those are really great to network and reach out to people. And it was just a post that where are you farming at? And I saw that you were in North Carolina, so I friended you, and you were like, do I know you? And I was like, hey, yeah, I farm black soldier fly larva. And you're like, oh yeah, I do on the side. I have this biopod, and I had heard of the biopod already, so I was like super excited. I wrote like a tiny little blog post on it, so that was really great. I was really happy. And then I got some, so yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a small world of people who are enthusiasts, and you tend to know everybody on the planet who has like an enhanced level of interest. There's only a couple hundred, I would say. I mean, there's a lot more people who grow up, but there's not as many enthusiasts like there is in vermiculture. And I'm hoping it will expand someday to really overshadow vermiculture because there's so many more potential, I think, opportunities with black soldier fly over the limited ones of redworms.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I'm having this podcast, and I love that you're talking about that, and I'd love to get into some of that and explore that. So, I guess first, I want to talk about your background a little bit. So, you're the inventor of the Biopod and the Protopod, and that's with
No, actually,
Paul.
I am just one of the marketers who originally went with the company's rollout. It was Dr. Paul Olivier. He is a scientist, and he invented the protopod. Robert and I, who were in business together, came up with the biopod, the small one, which is the rectangular unit. And I still continue their legacy of black soldier fly here in the States. We no longer make these offshore; they're made in North Carolina, and it is one of those things that the original design has been updated. So we are on the third generation now. We basically take all the ideas that users have provided us over the years, and we kind of take an amalgamation of those and update the molds to accommodate a lot of those enhancements.
Yeah, I love that. I think it's always good to be experimenting and innovating, and especially listening to your customers in the black soldier fly larva industry. So, Paul and Robert, I follow one, or I'm friends with one of them on Facebook. I believe one of them lives in Vietnam, correct?
Correct. The father, the patriarch, lives in Vietnam. Robert lives in Austin, Texas, and runs
Yes.
grubtubs.com. And we are good friends. I miss him. I wish we were closer because we enjoy each other's company, especially when it involves going out and dinner and food and drink and just having a good time. Austin, Texas is one of my favorite places, and it's a great excuse to go visit Robert. So if you haven't had an opportunity to go to Austin or anyone listening, it is a fantastic metro region. I highly recommend it because
Oh,
you can walk to everything. And that's really uncommon in the US.
yeah, no, that's exciting. I'm hoping to visit Texas to see some of the soldier fly larva stuff down there. I know Dr. Tom Brilliant's down there, and I see you are friends with him on Facebook. He wished you a happy birthday. Um,
He's one of the main entomologists in the U.S. Leading research in black soldier fly. He's an amazing inventor and researcher. He actually has a site called EcoConsys, I believe.
EVO conversion
Evo
systems.
Consist. Yeah, I'm sorry, Evo Consist. And they do hardware and lighting that would enhance people's ability to grow them indoors.
Yeah, they also do some consulting too. I'll just throw in there because I actually
Yeah.
got
Have
some
you tried
consulting.
their technologies yet, Spencer?
Yeah, I have one of their lights, and I had one of their breeding cages. I'm putting off breeding a little bit right now, but I think I've had successful eggs with in the past with it, and
They have egg laying technologies
they're
as well.
good. They're very
Those little
helpful.
devices. Yeah, they are.
Oh,
They
I
have
have
those
those
little
too.
devices where they can oviposit eggs, and you can take it and
Yes,
um,
I have.
make the eggs more mobile.
Yes, I have those too, and I'm very excited to use those in the future. And actually, I'm planning on using those with your Biopod and Protopod out this summer because I wasn't able to do it. I live in Ohio, so I wasn't able to do it over the winter, and
Are you zone 6 or 7?
I'm not actually sure. I'm very close to Lake Erie, Akron, Ohio, so I don't know, but I'm planning on using those to catch the eggs and
Do you
see.
see wild black soldier fly in your area in the summer?
That's hard to say because we don't have any really like compost piles or anything that would attract them or whatnot. We live across from a lake, so I go out there, but I don't really see any of them. I've heard people going to reptile shows. They say, "Oh yeah, we have these in their compost pile. I didn't know what these were." So I definitely think we have them in Ohio.
Okay, parts of Pennsylvania have them, parts of Ohio have them, but not your area.
Okay, gotcha.
It's too cold. Now, with climate change, the climate zones are migrating north about 100 miles per decade. So maybe in a decade or two, you'll start seeing them.
Right. And I know we talked about before, like maybe I could even produce like a microclimate with soldier flies that I had been dumping
Yeah, I mean,
out.
it's like growing figs. Figs aren't necessarily adapted to your climate, but you can naturalize them in ways by kind of tweaking the environment so that they last, season to season. It's no different. You come up with tips and tricks to just make sure that they overwinter.
Yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
cool. So I did want to ask you if Grub Tubs is still active on their Facebook page. It looked like they were closed. So I just wanted
I
to.
don't know if they have a social media presence. I know they're doing very well.
Okay,
Diverting
good.
food waste from restaurants and other commercial sources of food waste. And then Robert converts it into usable commodities like compost and other types of items that they can sell. They are reusing the biodiesel, I think, on site, the fat components of the food waste to power a lot of the machinery, which is a great way of reducing the carbon footprint of the food waste. And as far as I know, it's extremely successful, but like everybody, they have growing pains. As you grow too quickly, you have to, accommodate all the additional food waste streams. And that can be a challenge when you realize that 2 trucks are not 10 trucks and you need more. So I know that those are problems most businesses wish they have, but it's something you do have to manage.
Well, that's great. I'm glad to hear that they are still in business.
Yeah, they are doing very well. And
That's
Robert and I
great.
talk occasionally. I wish we were still in alignment with the black soldier fly, but we each pursue what we love, and that's a good thing. But we have a great relationship, and we're going to continue to hopefully come up with additional future technologies for black soldier fly. So I can't talk too much about it, but I'm excited about the prospects.
Okay, that's exciting. So you got stuff coming down the pipeline. So
Yes.
Getting into that topic, let's talk about like your Biopod and Protopod for anybody that's not familiar with them. I think they're a great system to get into black soldier fly larva farming without doing anything crazy or having to design your own devices. But I think it's good to have your own experiment and do your own stuff. But I think that if you really just want to get into it, learn about it, see if it's for you, and have a good system that has been sold to a lot of people and it's proven time and time again. So if you could just explain the system.
Yeah. For small hobbyists and people who have things like reptiles, amphibians, tropical fish that don't need huge quantities of black soldier fly, I always recommend the smaller one, the Biopod Plus, which is the rectangular one. There is a knockoff copy that emulated us from China that is in production now. It's the green one online that you've seen. what's the word? I guess copying is the best form of flattery, but they basically took our design and just made it overseas at a cheaper cost. Because, you know, we still hand make them with US labor. And so there's, you know, it's a higher cost. It's probably $20, $30 more than you can do in China. But with all the tariffs coming in from China now, I'm not sure how the cost is of it, but we've tested their product. We like it. It works really well. So if you, for some reason, want to try theirs, we recommend theirs as well. Their drainage is not as robust as ours because of the base plate. I always tell people the most important thing about black soldier fly, besides maintaining temperature and humidity parameters, is drainage. You never want to have food waste sitting in liquids, or it can cause stink. It can cause anaerobic conditions. It can cause an environment that's not necessarily pleasant to the black soldier fly and incentivizes house flies and other filth flies. So our drainage is designed to move away water from the active pile as quick as possible. Hence the different layers of coir. And we're experimenting with hemp, and I think you got some of the samples, correct?
I did, but I would say I'm not the best at the Biopod Protopod. The first time I was growing it outside, and I talked about that in my previous episode, how I was growing outside, and I think a lot of contamination, a lot of house flies came in, and vectors of disease and whatnot. And then I was moving it inside a little bit, but I wasn't as consistent with checking it and adding food waste to it. So I think that I also overpopulated, I think. So, and I had to, so I did a lot of things wrong, and I had to unfortunately move that grow tent out because I'm expecting actually a sifter from China. It's funny you talk about tariffs because, yeah, the tariffs are ridiculous.
Yeah, they're probably not going to come down anytime soon. For people who aren't familiar with the reason why we're using a coir or coconut husk mesh, for people who aren't familiar with that word coir, it's the stuff in hanging baskets. So when you see a hanging garden basket with flowers in the summertime, that mesh liner is coir, C-O-I-R. And that's coconut husk fiber, so it's a recycled material. It has enormous structural integrity, but it drains liquid. So that's the push. It's going to hold the food waste up, but allow the liquid to go through. And then the base plate, that perforated polypropylene sheet, is the structure underneath the mesh to give it a little bit of gap between it and the drainage area below, which then, you know, leads outside. So it's a good way for people to get rid of the liquids, because food waste is what's municipal food waste? About 60% liquid now, Spencer, maybe 65. It's not,
yeah,
you're not talking about dry Cheetos. So you got to get rid of it. You can't let it back up. I tell people, if you're not somebody who wants to maintain the water drainage system, just take the whole thing off and let it drain passively into the ground or onto a tray, and then you don't have to worry about it. Because a lot of people will forget to actually go empty it, and it just backs up because, you know, there's a spigot in it, or a thumb valve, and it will back up if you don't empty it occasionally. But that's the small one. I recommend it for people who also are starting out in chickens or poultry, like quails, for small flocks. I also have noticed a lot of people are starting to breed bullfrogs, and bullfrogs really like the grubs. And people who have koi, you know, other fish, they're really good. And then anglers, people who fish. When you fish with worms versus fish with black soldier fly, they hold onto the hooks a little bit better for fishing and casting. So it's really good for anglers. And in regards to the larger one called the Protopod, that's the 4-foot unit that's circular, that looks like a mini jacuzzi. It's the equivalent of 5 times the little one. So you're going to get a lot more grubs. And it's for people who need more voluminous amounts of grubs, especially people who have large poultry flocks or aquaculture, you know, raising tilapia, catfish, bluegills. I know a couple of my customers have purchased the 4-foot deep, 22-foot diameter kiddie pools from Walmart and are growing catfish, bluegills, and other types of aquatic species for the purpose of, you know, aquaculture, to have backyard grown fish And instead of buying fish food for them, they're using black soldier fly and duckweed and some other materials that they're growing on site, which I think is fantastic. It's really, really great for self-reliant people who would want to lower their food bill and have the space. But you really, Spencer, you can't outsource self-reliance. So
that's true. That's
the more,
true.
the more money, the more things you can do on your property, the more you're going to save.
That's true. And I know that's a big part of Tar River Trading Post.
Yeah, it is. We try to get people just to prepared for unexpected, unexpected events.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've been around a time in the Black Soldier.
2007 is when I started with Black Soldier Fly. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So
I knew about him in 2006, but didn't really go into the industry to the next year.
Okay, so what really drew you into this industry, and then how would you say the entrepreneurial landscape in the United States is looking for Black Soldier Fly larva farmers, especially since that you sell the Protopod and the
I do
iPod.
Consulting work too, so I do have that on the side, but I try not to do it too much, and I usually refer others to it. Like I know people who are doing the consulting full time, and so I'll recommend them because they have kind of the bandwidth to do it. Whereas when you own a company and that ships out products all the time, you kind of are tethered here and don't have the luxury to go to Moldova to consult or wherever. So I guess my interest peaked when I found out the digestive enzyme profile of this species when it fed and ate food waste could handle fats, carbohydrates, proteins, nucleic acid, and eat just about everything in the food waste stream. Unlike a lot of the competitors, and the speed, the fact that it can do it in 1 day or less was really intriguing to me.
Exciting.
And I think those two things were not only exciting, but I thought there was potential because, composting microbes can take months. And then red worms are kind of not very quick either, even though they're much faster than microbes. I think this is a more exciting species. The speed and the width and the breadth of food waste really captured my interest. Also, because I think they're elegant a species too. I think they're very, you know what I mean? Like they're very cool.
Yeah, definitely. How I think it's interesting how they, also reproduce so rapidly. And I feel like that's like what's the word? Like an evolution to, reproduce so rapidly. I think that's really cool that's like their species, kind of like defense mechanism, since they're,
there's not many insect species that humanity has really a symbiotic relationship with, like the silkworm, obviously, and what would be another example? Obviously, honeybees. So, and bumblebees and other pollinators. So there are insects that benefit us, and actually, if you think of it this way, the fact that humans are naturalizing black soldier fly, it's expanding naturally beyond its native range, and so we're actually helping it to survive, and hopefully breeding it in a way that's going to make their genetics more robust and solve a lot of problems of humanity.
Yes, I love that. I love that you're talking about that. You said that you don't really have any insight onto like the industry for the black soldier fly larva because you're not doing as much consulting. You're just shipping out the products now.
We are shipping out the products. We are doing some research and testing on things, primarily for people who don't have access to food waste. We're trying to come up with an elixir of stuff that we can give the black soldier fly that can be done on your property, and you don't have to like go out and find food waste, because not every household generates a lot of food waste. So people want to grow a lot of black soldier fly, need something to feed them. And so we have found and discovered that duckweed grown on your property and then fed to the black soldier flies is a great food source, has a lot of protein, has definitely the moisture content necessary. A lot of foods that are too dry, you have to soak or you have to add water to them, like I don't know, breads. We used to get a lot of bread waste from bakeries. Oh my God, you have to soak that. It's just way too dry. The black soldier fly need some type of moisture. So the duckweed's already pre-moistened. And I'm hoping that more people start to experiment with duckweed, because there are 2 strains that are edible for humans, which is fantastic. And you can feed it to your aquatic species that you're raising.
Yes, I know that. I guess I won't say the college, but I know some colleges actually experimenting with putting duckweed into aquaculture food that I'm hoping to do.
You have to try growing it this year. Just order the colonies on eBay and get the ones that are human edible. So
okay.
It'll cover 2 bases. And just try it. You're going to be, Karl, this is a game changer. We need to figure out a way to use this more. I mean, seriously, I mean, it's sequestering carbon out of the atmosphere. It's providing a food source for humans. It's providing food source for animals and your insects. I mean, come on. It's a win-win.
And it grows very rapidly too, right?
It's scary. I think it reproduces like daily or every 2 days. It's asexual reproduction. So it's just like cleaves or buds, another one, and then another one, and then another one. It's so successful. You can't let it enter the waterways, or it can cover an entire pond.
Oh, wow.
You can't let it get loose.
I love that idea too, with like the synergy of different ideas coming together. I've been thinking about my next episode actually is going to be with someone who does isopods and springtails. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Love isopods.
Yeah. Awesome. So I'm thinking about putting some probably springtails to possibly keep down the mold in the biopods if I'm not attending to it as often, or, if you're outside. So I was thinking about doing that for my next.
What are you going to do with the isopods? Are you going to use them as feed for higher species, or just as pets?
I just use the isopods they actually have a big industry they clean up the poop. It's called bioactive enclosures for reptiles. So I like to put them in my, I have an Abronia graminia, a Mexican alligator lizard. So I like to put them in there, and also my crested gecko. But will
they eat them too?
They do eat them sometimes. And because I can't find them anymore. So I'm imagining they're eating them, or they're just dying. But
some of the isopod cultivars are really attractive. Like, they have really nice patterns to them. You're just like, wow.
Oh, yes. And the lady I'm bringing on next week, hopefully, I guess if this podcast comes out every week, she has, I think they're called green lasers, and they're only one of 3. She is that by, I'm not sure, unfortunately. She's in Ohio, so it's like,
okay, no, I know somebody here who raises them. That's why I asked.
Okay, but yeah, she has a green laser isopod, and it's like one of only 3 in the United States. So she's very knowledgeable, has like 250 different types of isopods. So I'm excited to have her on.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, but let's move on a little bit. So how do you see the future of agriculture in the United States?
Sure, go ahead.
Oh, so I think a big thing I want to look at in this podcast is soil health, and talk about regenerative agriculture. Do you think that the black soldier fly larva frass will be a good source of putting organic matter back into the soil?
I don't know if black soldier fly is going to be the means of reintroducing nutrients into our soil. I think we have other larger scale ways of doing that. Everything from biochar to just permaculture. So there's so many other ways that I think are more scalable. I think the frass has higher, better uses. Like, for example, I was talking to some researchers in California that we had given some pulverized frass to. And when I say pulverized, we took the frass and we put it through, a coffee grinder.
Yeah.
I made it into like a flour. We also gave them dead black soldier fly adult carcasses. You know how they don't live very long. They're maybe 2 weeks. And for people who breed them indoors, you have a lot of dead black soldier flies after they've made
Absolutely.
it. And instead of tossing those somewhere or composting them, we were collecting them, and we're also grinding up into like a black powder. Apparently, both of those, because they're so high in chitin, are really good ways to invigorate the immune system in certain plants and help plants fight insects, mites, and soil-borne nematodes better. So I remember the pod industry in California was like, oh my God, we love this. It helps to control the nematodes. It helps to control mites. And we're just like, really? And we didn't go any further with it because it wasn't a revenue stream for our model. We don't make money raising grubs. We just make money selling the technology for you to do it. But we want people to come up with monetary ways of using the frass and using the exoskeletons in a way that are beneficial for indoor cultivation, some different types of plants that actually are plagued with problems in the greenhouses. Mites and nematodes are real problems, and you want to use natural ways to control it, not chemical ways. But I do think there's going to be higher, better uses for those two materials. Soil agriculture is going to be critical, and we are going to relocalize in this country. When I say relocalize, I think food sources are going to become much closer. You're not going to be having 1,800-mile salads. Everything's going to be going closer, because I think we're going to be forced to with the climate issues and the fuel and carbon footprint issues. So I think it's inevitable, and I think it's exciting because that opens up a huge array of business opportunities for your generation.
Yeah, absolutely.
And fun too.
Yeah.
It has to be fun.
That was great. That was great. I actually read, I think it was just on a forum, but it was talking about microbiology and how the microbiology, I'm not exactly sure what strain of microbiology it was, but they had helped cultivate, the frass helped cultivate this microbiology. And the person that was posting about it was talking about how they had seen less gnats flying around. And I guess this microbiology actually eats the gnat's eggs in the gnat larva, so they can't, turn into gnat flies and fly around. So I thought that was very interesting. So is what you're pretty much saying is it's more frass is going to be used for pest management, not so much soil health.
Well, in your case, I mean, there's an example of a great higher use, the control of gnats. Instead of just soil health, I think there's going to be a lot of opportunities that really take advantage. Just like, how castings took off with vermiculture, and now they're used for a huge array of uses in agriculture. I think you're going to see that as black soldier fly industrially scales, and we start having large volumes of castings and frass and exoskeletons. But a lot of people don't even talk about the exoskeletons, but I look at it as a resource.
Yeah. So do you think that farmers are, so obviously there's a trend in black soldier fly larva interest. So do you think farmers are interested in this, or are they going to be willing to switch or change their current processes? And I guess like this may piggyback on your other comment that this is going to be used more for soil health. So do you think that this is going to be like an industrialized, used with corn and soy, or is it going to be more like indoor farmers growing like per se like orchids, lettuce, strawberries, stuff like that, indoor gardeners, hobbyists?
I think you're going to see a diversity of opportunities in the industrial marketplace. In the sector that I'm talking about, you have these big factories that exist overseas now in China that are producing huge quantities of black soldier fly. They're not necessarily growing them on food waste as they should. They're growing it on like commodity foods that they just feed it like barley and wheat and stuff like that, which I don't like taking food that can be fed to humans and then diverting it to black soldier fly. I think you should use waste streams first. In that respect, I think the industrial market is driven by a couple things. The biodiesel opportunities. I think it's driven by pet feed, because pet feed, especially fish meal, is becoming extremely expensive. And so if they can substitute it for insect meal, there's a lucrative opportunity there. So I think there's things that are driving the market other than the specialty aspects of it, like food for reptiles, which, the market's not that huge globally. The pet trade, even though it is large, it's not going to be enormous. And so they're looking for other angles. And I think the biodiesel is one. And the second one is going to be insect proteins and insect meal in pet food.
Okay.
So we'll see. I don't see entomophagy. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
Human consumption of insects
Yes. Yep.
being a huge interest yet, but I bet you it's going to become more trendy in Europe before it does here. And I've tasted them. We went to a potluck that only used black soldier fly. It was fantastic. Every meal was good, including the desserts. And I highly recommend doing that this year just to taste it yourself. You're going to be so surprised how delicious it is.
Oh, that's great. So going back to something that you just said, you said there's a lot of big overseas in China, the plants that process black soldier fly larvae. I know there's Enviroflight here in the United States, and Terra in Canada. I know there's one on the West Coast in California. Starts with a V that has, it looks like they're pretty sizable. And then I guess you could put EVO popworms in there as producers, pretty decently commercial size. Why do you think that there is not as many black soldier fly larva companies here, and why do you think that there isn't as big of scale as black soldier fly larva companies? I would feel like Enviroflight is a huge dominate market share, you know.
I think there were originally regulatory barriers that are still persistent in people's minds. Even if a lot of those barriers have now been removed, people are still thinking that there are barriers in the regulatory environs, and it's holding people back and holding investment money back, because, you know, people who are investing in you tend to be very financially conservative and they don't want high risk, and regulatory barriers are high risk. And so if they have knowledge that there's a guaranteed market for what they're investing in, then they'll pursue it. So my guess is probably the investor class is still reluctant to throw the money, even though you and I know the technology of those companies that you just mentioned are pretty sound, and it works what they're doing. So I think it has to do right now with the perception that there's still regulatory barriers. But my guess is, as the legislation comes forward that happened in Vermont last year or the year before that says no more food waste in the landfill, period, figure it out. Once other states start adding that legislation prohibition, I think you're going to see people scrambling to come up with ways to get rid of the food waste. And I think the black soldier fly is the perfect way to do that, provided that you have industrial places that can do it year round. I mean, you and I who do it seasonally can't really accommodate, several tons of waste.
Yet. No, but I love that. That was really great. I think that's a great little nugget for our listeners. So do you want to talk about the drainage piece? I know of your biopod. Well, let me ask this first you might not know this question, so we might end up taking out a podcast, but what price point do you think frass will be per pound or per kilogram in the United States now and in the future? That one might be a hard one for you.
I think it's going to be significantly more expensive than castings. Worm castings right now have gotten really affordable, and I've seen the frass at a much higher rate, depending on where you are in the country. I think there is a premium value associated with the frass, and I think it's going to be a revenue stream for all those companies that you mentioned, because they're going to have so much of it. Why not pursue that opportunity financially? But I think right now it's an expensive commodity for gardeners. I mean, if you want to try it out and experiment it, my recommendation to people is if you have specialty gardening niche, like let's say you're growing orchids, I think that came up earlier, or something that you really don't want to lose because it's a high value, horticulture item, and you want to control pests in a natural way, I think experimenting with the frass to see if it would accommodate that is a great approach and a good idea, and it's not that expensive. You can get it. I think I see it on eBay. Do you see it on eBay as well?
Oh yeah, I do see it on eBay. I think Earth Garden has some black soldier fly larvae.
I'm not
Um,
sure who their source is. Do you know who?
no, I'd love to know that. I would love to know like more. That's kind of why I've started this podcast, is to like figure out stuff, network a little bit
It's
more.
it's a very incestuous family, and there's like not that many growers. So every time somebody says, "Oh, I have this," I'm like, "Well, who's your grower?" Because there's not that many like large
No,
growers out there, and
no.
that's the new technology that we're developing now will allow more commercial aspects of growing this easier than our larger pods. They'll be equivalent to the larger pods, but they'll be more user friendly for people who want to use warehouse space for black soldier flies. So
Okay.
it's exciting. I can't reveal anything more than it'll satisfy that industrial niche.
Do you have a date that you're planning on revealing?
Hopefully this year.
Hopefully this year. Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. So now let's go to your drainage. Talking about the drainage system,
Yeah.
I wanted to touch back on that a little bit,
Right.
and just comment that you can use the liquid to attract the flies, and it's an attractant for the flies. Because I know on the Facebook groups, a lot of people have had they just have problems attracting flies from the wild, and whether that's not there, or I see a lot of overseas people trying to start their own colonies
I
with
know.
that.
It's tough. You know what? Remember, this is a native U.S. species, native to the
Right.
southeastern. It's not present in a lot of overseas areas if it hasn't been introduced. So just because they can attract it doesn't mean they're not doing it the right way. It just means it might not be in their local area.
Okay.
Um, so I
That's
always tell them, if you don't think it's in your local area, just get some colonies. But you know what? If it is in your local area, Spencer, and I always stress this, don't buy online eggs or buy online larvae. Attract them, because the genetics of your area is going to be the best when it comes to the black soldier fly, because they already living in your area now. So if you're ordering, you live in, let's say, Georgia, you don't want to necessarily order black soldier fly from the Pacific Northwest,
right.
because the genetics is going to be different. So go with what's local, and you're going to have the most robust growth. But if you don't have it in your area, you have to order.
Okay.
It's
And I
just as simple as that. But I always tell people, try to attract if you have them.
Okay, so I think that leads perfectly into our another question about you had mentioned to me previously that you tried to breed wingless black soldier fly larvae, and I think actually this is a perfect time we're coming in this interview. I don't know if you saw it, but I think Protix, and if you're not familiar with that company, they're in Europe somewhere. I'm not exactly sure. I
Are they
should
South Africa?
No, I've now you're making me second guess myself. Well, I believe they're in the Netherlands, I thought,
Okay,
but
okay.
they came out with some research or like an article saying that they were able to grow a strain of black soldier fly larva that was, I believe, 20% heavier than regular black soldier fly larva. So I thought that was very interesting. And you're talking
Yeah, they're
about,
doing some interesting things in Israel too. I don't know if
okay,
you've been reading about that.
no, I have
Higher
not.
biodiesel, higher oil content for the purpose of energy oils.
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah. You did mention that to me also as well. So yeah, if you could just touch on like the different breeds, and I've also been thinking about doing this personally in my own colony. I order personally from Popworms EVO conversion systems right
Yeah,
now.
they have great eggs. Oh my gosh, they're so wonderful.
They do,
Such good quality.
they're great. But I also wanted to reach out to Enviroflight because they're Kentucky, Ohio, North Carolina now. That's their third facility.
Oh,
But
I didn't know they were supplying eggs.
well, they're not. I buy the neonatal larva actually. So that's what I do, and I just grow them up. But just being so close in Ohio, and having that different genetics, I'd like to work with two different genetics of the black soldier fly larva just to see if I notice any difference in my data when I'm collecting data.
Well, plus you're increasing the vigor by hybridizing two different strains, and so
Hmm.
it helps overall. I think with more genetics and less. It's like when you inbreed dogs too much, you get problems like hip dysplasia, blindness, deafness. But when you allow them, mutts to breed into something that is not a breed anymore, there's a lot less problems because the hybridization makes the genetics more robust. Hybrid vigor, I think, is what they call it in biology.
Yeah.
Yeah, you were talking about drainage. Drainage, when you collect the liquids, I always recommend take a jar, like a mason jar that's a wide mouth, not a narrow mouth, and freeze it for the next year. And the reason I say the wide mouth, if you freeze a jar of narrow mouth, the water expansion when it freezes will break the glass. But the wide mouth, it just goes a little deeper by a tenth, and it won't break the glass. And then just wait until next year and use it, because it doesn't keep and it has a bad odor. So I tell people just freeze it and use it in the spring to attract. And I tell people to mix it into their substrate, whether it's coffee grounds, and we discussed Burr's mash before.
Yes, that's
anyway, that's
really
what
great.
the good to have drainage is. You want to be able to capture the liquid in some way at least once a year, and then freeze it and stow it away.
Yeah, that's great. Can the liquid be used for a fertilizer at all?
We had somebody in Texas who was obsessed with the pods just to collect liquids, because he was convinced he was growing prized peppers.
Yeah, okay.
So I went to visit his facility, and yes, these peppers were like 7 or 8 feet tall, which was really tall for peppers. I usually don't see peppers that tall. Even the poblanos that I have grown are only about 5 feet. Anyway, maybe there was a connection. I think it was more just his restaurants, because he was getting a high premium for his peppers. But I don't know if it had anything to do with the black soldier fly effluent.
Okay, awesome. I guess let's start to wrap it up. I don't want to take up too much of your time. I've really enjoyed having you on. Is there anything that that you'd like to mention, or that I didn't know enough to ask about, or anybody that you'd recommend that should come on the podcast? Yeah.
I guess the only thing that the takeaway is, I think we need to grab some wings and go a couple thousand feet up and look down. And we do have a problem with climate, and we do have to acknowledge that food waste is going to the landfills, decomposing anaerobically as methane, and causing a huge impact to the climate. We're going to need to address that. And any way we can get rid of food waste in a biologically efficient and beneficial way, I think is a good thing. Black soldier fly satisfies that. We just need additional strains which are adapted to colder climates, which are adapted to drier climates, that can allow a wider audience to grow these, rather than just people who live in the warm, humid areas like the Southeast. So I think these new strains and breeds will be beneficial to the industry. I think eating lower on the food chain and less cows, because of their huge ecological footprint, and eating lower healthy proteins like insects, I think is an opportunity that's overdue. And I think we need to literally cultivate that more. So I think the future is going to be exciting. And I think black soldier fly is going to be an integral component of that. It's just still, I think it's in its infancy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's a really good summarization.
But it's so exciting to be part of it.
Yes.
Right now when it's developing.
Yes. I get like emails from people all around the world, and I just think it's really cool because, I'm just a 22-year-old. I'm in this, I'm in it for the long haul pretty much, but I just think it's awesome how I've had doctors from, like you said, Israel reach out to me, and they're like, "Oh, what are you using for your attractant?" And I was like, "Well, I kind of know a little bit about
What
this."
is your best attractant personally? What is your go-to attractant?
I would say the smell of the liquid. Honestly, that was what I think that I had best, and just the active smell of the colony. When I was breeding outside and I had the cage and I got my first fertile eggs, I had taken I think it's kind of burlap you put on the top, right? So I took that burlap actually, and I put it on the top of the biopods, a little closer to the light, and I put those the eggies from EVO conversion systems on top of that, and I was actually able to get my first eggs. Then I think maybe because I was outside, it was July, so it probably right humidity, and that's something we wanted to touch on too. Is humidity is really important in the black soldier fly larva industry and growing them outside, and you can't grow them everywhere, or you need to like try and manage it. And that's something we didn't exactly get to touch on, but I'm mentioning it now.
Well, you could tell people you have a YouTube video that talks about humidity. I think that's really important that people watch because in the drier climates, it's going to be a challenge without increasing the humidity artificially.
Yeah, thank you. I thank you for mentioning that and watching that. I am making an animated video series over some of the research that's been out on black soldier fly larvae, so you should definitely check that out on YouTube.
The only thing
you,
else I can mention is anyone who's listening to Spencer's podcast and wants one of these units and doesn't feel like building one themselves and trying it out with a home unit, just reach out and we'll offer a discount. Just make sure to mention Spencer's podcast so that I don't know, we can give them like $50 off or something like that, just off the big pods. The little ones probably won't get much of a discount because they're already pretty discounted, but the big one is what seems to interest most people these days anyway.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'd like to thank you for coming on the podcast,
Oh, sure.
Karl. And then I'd like to thank everyone else for listening. And if you're interested in coming on the show, email Ecoflys website at gmail.com. And if you're interested in becoming a sponsor of the show, you can also email me. And stay safe. And remember, one person's trash is another person's treasure.